this might just be the end, and this might be my great last thing that I will ever put out.
It's totally fine, I think, to come to that conclusion.
And I wasn't even sure after that thought whether I will make more music, because part of me really was this exhausted mentally and physically.
How do you feel now?
I feel better now.
You gonna make another record now?
I'm gonna make another record now.
Fuck you, mate. Make another fucking record. Man, we're still here. I'm so grateful. I'm so happy to see you.
I'm happy to see you too, man.
You know, you gave us so much in such a short period of time as such a young man. You came out and you gifted us with so much amazing music. You worked really hard and you gave everybody memories they'll never forget, experiences no one will ever forget. And then, you know, you've taken your time and you look like someone who's lived some life.
Yes.
And I love to see
it right here.
Yeah, well, you can see it all over me as well. But I mean that in the highest compliment because it's hard to get off that wheel and take your time, and I'm glad you did. I hear it on this album. I hear the time you took. I'm excited to see you and talk to you, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a minute. And I knew you were working, and I know that when you're head down and you'll be done when you're done.
Yeah.
But I always think when someone takes an amount of time with no real sense of restriction or boundary, you know, people say I took my time, but really they were given a year and they took a year.
Yeah.
You took multiple years to do this. You know, not to start off on a sort of challenging note, but are there times when that can actually start to work against you a little bit, where it's like, man, I'm so in my own space here, and the only pressure I'm under is my own.
Yeah.
How do I close the loop on this thing?
It can definitely be a disadvantage to take too much time, but it really depends on what you're trying to do. And I think for me, this album specifically, at some point in time, I had to make a decision what this album was going to be about. And in 2020 or so, I started working on an album, but I had no idea what I'm actually doing. Yeah. It was kind of like, well, there's a pandemic. When am I going to get another chance to sit down and make music? But I didn't have real, genuine inspiration.
Yeah.
And I was aimlessly trying to make music without any context or real reason.
You know how to sound design, bro. You know it sounds good.
I can make a good song.
Yeah.
But 10 of them aren't going to make a good album.
Well, they're also not going to, that's your outer voice. You got to find out what your inner voice is saying, right?
Exactly. And I grew up with these albums that were more than just 10 good songs. They stayed with me to this day.
Yes.
And they still inspire me. And I feel like they made me the musician I am today. And I wanted to create something that was this meaningful.
Yeah.
I wanted to make an album that in 30 years, I will meet a kid who's like, I heard this album and I wanted to get into music.
Yeah.
And it inspired me to look into sound design and maybe combine genres. And so there was this moment throughout making this record where I had to make the decision that this is an album for me. And when I made that decision, it sort of put everything in place. All the songs that I had started where I was like, how am I going to make 7, 8 work in dance music? Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's no longer dance music. It's just going to be my album forever. And it's mine. And I'm making this for myself, not for the fans, not for the label, not for anybody. It's just for me. And if everybody wants to join me, that's amazing. And if it's just for me, then that's amazing too.
How freeing.
It's really freeing, and it's all in your head. That's the crazy part. I could have made that decision 8 years ago.
It's all in our head.
But I haven't.
Our head is infinite possibility that we create finite boundaries for.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind that we've been sort of indoctrinated into that way of thinking generation after generation after generation after generation. But the arts are a way of actually exploring what is possible. So when you come to that conclusion, you inspire us to do the same in whatever walk of life we're in.
That would be the best case scenario. But I think for me, it was a very freeing moment to realize, well, this is going to be a work of art. It's going to be a concept album. I will do all the little things that I want to do that will make me really happy, like connecting almost every song besides the ones where I want you to feel a break, and really think about how am I going to get from song A to song B in an intelligent way.
That's a really interesting way to approach it. People get scared of the C word. I'm not talking about the one that's offensive in every country except New Zealand. Concept albums, it's tough. It's a tough thing for people to get their head around, because what it says to fans is this is an investment of your time. This isn't a collection of songs. You can listen to song 3 or song 6. I really hope you listen to it in its entirety. And that is a beautiful request, but obviously time is precious to people, and we try to keep the trade simple, right? To give ourselves the best chance of staying connected to one another. We try not to complicate things, and I think sometimes concept records can feel complicated.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear from you in your own words, what it means to you, what that word you just used means to you in terms of this album.
It has a couple meanings. I think we, in today's day and age, live in a playlist world, and albums have been heavily impacted by playlists, so that a lot of people have been just putting tons of songs on an album.
Yes, scale the music,
quantity, and more chances to be part of many playlists, to the point where artists don't really give fans a real reason to even listen to the album front to back, because the playlist oftentimes is better than the actual album. So yeah.
Preach.
So my idea was, I'm going to have to make an album that is just a reason to listen to it front to back, and not just random songs thrown together.
Can I tell you my theory right now?
Please.
Your generation right now is so important to the arts because you're coming out of the algorithmic social media feed, playlist. Everything is so modular that you sort of get to pick it apart and build your own version of what your day of entertainment will be. We have every right to do that. That is progress. That is efficiency. I work at a company. We meaningfully try to provide that for people, so you've got more time to do things that you want to do, right?
Yep.
Love it. It's part of the purpose of innovation. Your generation's coming out of that, coming out of the social media feed, and coming out of the playlists, and coming out of the algorithm, and you're saying, I'm making an album.
Yep.
I'm Billie Eilish. I'm making an album. I'm going to promote it like it's 1996. I'm going to tour the world for 4 months and tell everybody that I'm proud of it. I'm Charlie XCX. I'm going to show up every single day, even though the album's been out for months, and I'm going to do something cool and exciting to let you know it's a brat summer. Right?
Yep.
So you have done the same thing. You're saying to kids, man, my music is not for the algorithm, and it is not for the social media feed, and it is not just for TikTok.
Yep.
My music is for me. Come along for the ride.
Yeah. And
fuck yes.
There's been many moments in the album where I had to make that decision over and over. For example, and you will know this, I grew up with CDs. I passed the vinyl stage, but I remember listening to a record over and over, and then I didn't press stop, and all of a sudden there was a little hidden track at the end.
Yeah, they used to annoy the shit out of me, but go on.
Really?
Oh, yeah, because I was just like, I don't have 30 minutes to wait.
Okay, well, 30 minutes is a little bit long.
Sometimes you just be like, oh my God. Or you'd put the album on to go to sleep, and you'd just be go to sleep, and then be like, here's your fucking bonus track, here's your fucking bonus track. It's like, oh, fuck you.
It excited me. It excited me because I didn't
great.
grow up with a lot of money, so I would spend my money on albums, and then it felt like, whoa, I got a complimentary little extra.
It was great.
And I loved that feeling.
Probably
and
the first Easter egg, really, in music in a weird way.
Yeah, I loved it. I remember, like, I couldn't believe it. There was something else. So this is something that inspired me. So I wanted people to have that experience. But how? Because in today's world, you can't hide a track.
Yeah.
You will see that there's more to it. But still, I decided to fuck the algorithms.
Yeah.
And add silence at the end of it, and then give you the experience if you just listen to it and don't look.
Yeah.
Of like, whoa, there's a little bit of extra for me.
It carries on.
Things that matter to me, little notes, string hits, a trumpet hit from albums that matter to me, that inspired me. I would sort of pay homage to those little things. I had a song on 7/8, or have a song on 7/8 rather, where, you know, before I feel like I would have been scared away and would have made it 4/4 and made it danceable. But I really love The Olin, which is the band I collaborated with on this song.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of weird time signatures, and I've been loving that kind of music. So why wouldn't I make a song like that if that's what inspired me? So over and over, I wanted to make, to remind myself that this is for me, and I want to be happy with this album for the rest of my life. And I'm not going to please an algorithm that's ever changing and chase this tail that I'm never going to get to, because it's always different.
Well, it's hungry as fuck.
Yeah.
And it's insatiable, in fact. And so, you know, you just don't have enough music to feed the algorithm and in a way that's going to satisfy you, that the trade is going to give you back what you need.
It will always leave you unsatisfied no matter what you do, because the next second something changes and everything you've worked towards all of a sudden has changed. My goal, and I've said this with my first album, Clarity, is in 10 years, I want to look back at my album and be just as proud of it and feel like it's just as good.
Yeah.
And I felt that way 10 years in. And I want to feel the same way about this album, and I will in 10, 20, and 30 years from today. I'm going to look back and be so proud because this is a personal album with collaborations that matter to me, with artists who have inspired me, with people who I love working with. And it's a personal album. And how could something ever be not amazing if it's personally made for me, if it's not made for the algorithm or for the people?
Blessings on that, man. I love that you've come to that conclusion, especially coming out of a heady time that we both experienced. We did the same festivals, we did the same tours, we were traveling around the world. You were working way harder than I was, but I was working as hard as I could while I was doing radio shows. And I mean, we were running around and the money was great and the shows were awesome and everyone was having a great time.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, who's going to come out of this? Who's really going to come out of this? By that I mean, who's going to make a proper, solid mark, a positive impression on music in the decades to come, and not just tell the stories of 2008 to 2016? Who's going to be around? And I knew you would be straight away because I could tell you were really actually a producer and a songwriter, and that dance music you have a passion for. I'm not sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, you grew up thinking I'm going to be a touring dance superstar.
Never. That's the very last thing. I would probably have guessed that I'm a teacher before I'm a DJ.
Yeah.
I started with classical music, and then I was in a rock and metal band with my brother for nearly a decade.
Can you hold your thought there for 1 second? I really want to come back to that, but also I have to acknowledge that there is a very common transition from people who are classically trained into heavy metal and speed metal. I've interviewed so many people who were classically trained who then went through a speed metal phase and then end up going back and now composing cinema or theater and go back to their first love, but absolutely had their shred era.
Because it's hard. I think you learn all these, you get all these tools through classical music. And then there's genres that are a little simpler than others. And metal is a pretty hard genre.
Yeah.
Like think about the Dragon Force of the world. Like that stuff's hard to play. So I think it's kind of like a challenge. Like if you're into gaming, one day you're going to look for all those heavy games that are like you're going to have to repeat and learn and learn.
Yeah.
And I feel like metal is along those lines. It's really hard to do. You have to be really quick with your feet. You have to be very like you have to. Each limb has to be completely independent from one another.
And there's repetition and discipline involved, which seems to draw people into that particular type of goal.
Yeah, I mean, I was drawn into it, and at some point you kind of zoom out. You got the technicality down, and then you really want to do something for the heart.
There it is. So what draws you into, and I haven't forgotten about your brother, but what draws you in to the discipline before the heart? Because, for instance, I know people who learnt the discipline of writing songs by writing from the heart for 10 years, and then eventually they just got good, right? But you wanted to get good before you felt you could go searching for what you wanted to say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the same, by the way, goes for my approach to actually making dance music. I made a whole album as Zedd that I've never released. That was just there to learn.
A practice album.
Yeah. One song was called It's Automatic. Ironically, now I have a song called Automatic, yes. But the only purpose of the song was it was made of one sound and everything else was automation. And I told myself, this is the song I'm going to learn how to automate. Everything, like automate your bit crusher. And like, can I make a drum with this? And the song wasn't great, but it was kind of a concept. I'm going to learn how to do this. I'm going to learn how to do that. I don't even think I've ever showed you guys this album.
I'm kind of in awe. I mean, I've heard of songs not making the cut.
Yeah, the whole album didn't make the cut.
I can take it further than that based on what you're telling me. You may not even acknowledge this yourself. The whole album wasn't even supposed to make the cut. The whole album was by design, with intention, teaching you how to make another album.
Yeah, because I knew music.
That's a first. That's a first.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's not, but in our house, that's a first.
And I learned about sampling. I didn't know that sample packs existed. For example, that was like a revolution in my production skill. And when you listen to the album, that's the first time I started doing transitional songs where I made a song and my goal for this like experiment was I'm going to pick up the last bit of a song and make a new song out of this.
Out of that song.
So I learned to make transitional music, go from one song to another very early on before I really knew how to properly produce, because the albums in my early life did that.
So just getting back to the question, because I'm so glad you answered it the way you did, but are you any closer to understanding when did you start learning to play an instrument? How old?
I mean, I was 2 or 3 years old.
Okay, so when were you cognitively aware that you were practicing and learning something?
4 years. That's when we got our first keyboard.
So you're about 4 or 5 years old. You know, kids at that age, man, you're bouncing off the walls like a fucking atom, figuring out what you want to do. When you're 5 years old, you're going to be Lionel Messi.
Yeah.
You're not going to be Lionel Messi.
I'm certainly not going to be Messi.
I mean, it's 0.000000001% of the people who start playing sports as a kid, because everyone should play sports as a kid. It's great exercise and it's passion and it's teamwork and it's community, but there's 0.000000001% that you're going to play for Argentina professionally. That is just the fucking odds.
Yeah.
It's not to say you can't do it. It's not to say you won't do it. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You are like, boom.
Yeah.
Why?
First of all, both of my parents made music, and I was exposed to it from a very young age. So my first memory, of being alive is actually playing on the piano, and people laughing. And I was like, why are they laughing? And I remember this so vividly, because in my mind, it's like, this is not good.
I'm being serious.
This is not good. That's like my first memory at all. And the second was like eating ice cream. But
your first memory was being laughed at. That's so fucking brutal. I love this. I'm surprised you're here at all. I'm surprised, you're not either a stand-up comic or a fucking psychopath. Is what
I'm kind of a psychopath.
Maybe both? Okay, good.
A little bit. They're like, it kind of is good. So when your parents make music and you're surrounded by music all day, my parents, their work was to teach people instruments. That's what they did for a living most of their lives. So they started teaching me very young, and they made it a challenge. And maybe that's where this challenge started, because I believe a lot of in our lives kind of points back to the very first memories that we go through.
Totally agree.
And they purposely would structure it in a way where my mom would say, should he play this piece next? And my dad would be like, oh, I don't think he could do that. And I'm listening to that like, yeah, I can do that. Of course I can do that. And it was this challenge in me, like, I'm going to prove that I can do this. And they, of course, did that on purpose. So I always kind of skipped ahead and was ahead of like what I should have been playing at that age to prove to everyone that I can do it. Maybe that's where a little bit of that fire in me was started, that I want to do these difficult challenges in my life.
Yo, your parents on some fucking Montessori manifestation maestro shit, man. I'm telling you, that is like deep. That is deep. I mean, that is deep to understand just how you're built at that age and able to face a commitment and a challenge. I love it.
But it was not something, it was fun. It wasn't like in a bad way. It was like a challenge that I want to complete.
And they made it fun for you.
Yeah. I mean, they also made it not fun. There was a part where you get to a certain age and you don't want to listen to your parents. So at some point they were like, okay, you have a teacher now. Every week you're going to go and have piano lessons with this teacher. I'm like, I don't want to have lessons from anybody else.
I'm Lionel Messi.
But I did.
Yeah.
And I hated it. I hated every single lesson. I've always struggled to read music. Like it visually, I couldn't make sense of it.
I can't do it either, man. And I even tried at university. I was trying to take a basic course, part-time paper at university, and I checked out. I was like, this shit is worse than math.
Yeah. It doesn't work for me. So I always just learned the skill of listening and watching her hands. And I play it back and pretend that I can read it until she's like, yep, that was good. On to the next one. But this, like, music sheet to this day doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I feel like there's so many better ways of notation.
It's incredible though. I was talking to Max Richter about this the other day, and he was describing his process on music that he's been making lately, about how he was notating it and having the feeling before he even heard it being played, which was, now that blows my mind, because when you're in a situation where you're so in touch with how you hear and feel music, you don't even have to hear it to feel it, and you can feel it just by notating it. Like you're getting emotional knowing full well how it's going to play simply by putting it down on the sheet. I was like, damn, Max, that's like another level.
I cannot do that.
I cannot.
But I oftentimes turn my brain off, my cognitive side of the brain. I mean, that's how I write most of my chord progressions. And my hands just guide themselves.
Interesting.
They go wherever they want. I'm not actually thinking about anything in that moment. And
you're waiting for it to happen?
And it happens always. Like in the studio, I will sometimes just press record and I just play around, and then all of a sudden, and then I feel it. I get this, whoa, what was this? But I wasn't thinking it. It was just happening.
It's so funny because you do make a physical reaction. I do it when I write a song. When I'm writing and putting something down, I without even realize, I'll go, okay, or I'll go, oh, or whoa.
Yeah.
Or something will happen instinctively
where
my cognitive ability recognizes my subconscious, and they go,
yes,
hey, I got that. I heard what you just did.
This is exactly what it is. It's one part of your brain that's making you play certain things. I mean, that's improvising, right? When you improvise, is actually kind of like speaking in a sense. When you say a word, you actually don't really know what your next word is.
That is my
if you're
job.
not reading. That's true. You're very good at your job. So I can see you're good at improvising and writing. And then once you realize what you said, then you start feeling it. It's almost like a backwards.
It is like a backwards thing.
Yeah.
But isn't it beautiful when you realize that you can't replace the work? And so you got to chip and chip and chip and chip until something clicks, and you know when it clicks.
You definitely do.
When did you know when it clicked? If you could put the album into one immersive experience for you, what was a click moment for you?
I honestly, I don't know. This is probably not a good answer, but the click moment was when I was sitting down and thinking, I'm going to make this album for me. And every question for every song, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? All checked itself off. Because when you make it for yourself, none of the things that you subconsciously worry about matter anymore.
These albums that influenced you, obviously Jeff Buckley being one of them, and that's a whole other conversation we could have for hours and hours about Jeff.
Yep.
You know, I interviewed him once.
I do know.
I told you.
That's how we started talking about
it. Yeah. And it's to this day a memory I'll cherish forever. But yeah, I mean, what are these albums that as you're moving forward, you're like, well, the feeling I got from this is what I'm trying to achieve right now with this?
I think I have to put on the number one spot because it's the most influential album to my life is Silverchair Diorama.
That is unexpected and very welcome in this room. They are an incredibly influential and wildly underrated in terms of influence band.
Absolutely.
Daniel Johns, and also shout out to the guys, to Ben, to the rhythm section. But Daniel has the genius gene.
Absolutely. On another level. And I remember, this is the day I remember my brother brings home the album and we are in the living room and we sit down and our activity is listening to music.
Yeah.
I feel like this is something that people don't really do these days. Music has sort of taken on the role of either being the background to a video or a background to your work or activity.
Do you know why that is? That's because it's the most. I don't want to put art in.
Say it.
I don't want to put it out in. I don't want to put the arts in hierarchy, but it is very magical, and it is very easily shareable, and it is very malleable to experience and make. I can put it this way: it's salt. It's in everything. It makes everything taste better.
Yeah.
So everyone's like, why wouldn't I use it to make it better?
Completely fair.
But I understand what you're saying. It should be additive, not replacement. It shouldn't replace the opportunity to go and put on Diorama and sit and stare at the fucking Hudson and feel it for an hour.
That's the point. You're making the right point. The feeling aspect is something you lose when music takes on the role of being the background for something else. You can actually extract so much emotion out of and inspiration out of an album if it's a good album.
Well, if it means something to you.
If it means something to you, it can actually make you very emotional. And besides the sense of smell, which I think is possibly the strongest smell, you can just smell something and be like, I know this person. It's very intense, right? The emotional side of listening to an incredible album is like, it's so meaningful, and it was my development, my musical development. And the way this album made me a better musician and a writer and a producer, I wanted to make this album myself.
It's so funny you mentioned that album because that is their version of this album for you. That is the album that broke them out of being this precocious power trio who were touring with Soundgarden and on this grunge fucking train. Yeah. And Daniel Johns is like, well, I ain't that anymore.
Yeah.
And so this is where I'm going. Come with me or don't.
And ironically,
a lot of people did.
Yeah, I mean, this is when I started falling in love with the band.
They're a profound band for their time.
I would love for everybody to listen to Silverchair. Just to try. Yeah. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I got to know him a little bit, just literally online through the quarantine. We just got connected, and I called him one time and spoke to him on the phone, and it was a sweet conversation. I mean, he's lived a life, Daniel. He's had his ups and his downs.
Yeah,
for sure.
Not an easy life. But I've also read that this album, in a way, destroyed him personally because he set these unachievable standards. He wanted this album to be everything that he wanted it to be, even if it killed him in that regard.
So this is an interesting place for us to go because We just did the 100 best albums of all time on Apple Music, which was obviously a huge discussion. We were looking at this list as a whole, and this thing, because Throughline came through, which was really, a lot of these albums nearly broke the people that made them.
Yeah.
Can you say that about this record? Did it take you to the place of insanity at times?
It did. And
I'm not surprised.
I don't think any other album I've made, and I've only made 2 other albums, have gotten me to this point. And I have physical receipts, right? It's not just mentally I was exhausted.
In
but
what sense?
in the last, 5 or so weeks of making this album, I started losing weight and I just couldn't keep it on. And this whole year and a half, I had this amazing regimen. I stopped drinking for the most part.
Yeah.
I worked out a lot. I ate very healthy. I wrote down every calorie I ate or drank. I have a whole spreadsheet of every single day I can look back to. And I did amazing in terms of my health journey. But towards the tail end of it, I started dropping weight and I was still eating the right amounts and I was tracking my calories and I couldn't figure out why. There were days I was in the studio where I was sitting down doing nothing but recording a vocalist. And at the end of the day, I burnt more calories than if I run for 2 hours. And that was kind of my first time actually realizing what stress does to your body.
Oh, it is a killer.
It's really the worst thing.
It's the worst thing.
It's actual poison.
Fuck, dude. Well, okay. Sure. I was a cortisol addict for about 35 years. I did not do that.
Right.
I did not eat healthy. I don't think I ate a breakfast and lunch regularly for 30 years. I would eat at night.
Wow.
And I would just work during the day, and I figured that's how I'm going to achieve my best, right? Because the cortisol was just filling me full of this motivation, and it's just like, you can do it, go, 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 go.
Yeah.
My wife of nearly 25 years would just tell me, she's just thousands of times like, you're fucking killing yourself,
Yeah.
And it's, dude, it was very recently that I actually recognized what cortisol and how addictive stress is. Stress is not only very damaging, it is highly addictive.
I did not even know that.
As a motivating tool. I think it is. I see it all the time.
I hate stress.
Oh, I fucking hate it, but man, did I
don't like stress.
But I felt like I needed it to get me to where I needed to go, and I didn't even recognize it.
I would say I was the opposite. I structured my whole life around only spending a certain amount of hours, which was 6 to 7 hours a day in the studio.
Yeah.
So that the chunk of work, because truly making an album that is like climbing this mountain, you look at it and like, there's no way I will ever reach the top.
You got to charter a path.
And you got to just,
yeah,
one bit at a time, you're going to get higher, and at some point you can see the end of the tunnel. But those last bits of making the album felt like the tip of this iceberg was like just getting further and further away.
Did you recognize the stress was coming into your body and into your sort of spirit, or was it surprising?
No, it was surprising because I'm actually such a grounded person that I feel like I can tolerate stress pretty well. And I started having trouble sleeping. That's the first symptom. I would wake up in the middle of the night
around
with
2 or 3.
the song. Yeah, something like after a few hours of sleep.
Yeah, but that's your natural REM, which is waking you up, and then it's telling you, hey, go back to sleep, and if you're stressed out, you can't. And that's why you're up.
And I would think about the song that I had just worked on, and that wasn't the case for forever. I was able to shut off, sleep, restart. But at that point, I started not being able to sleep. I started asking people like, why do I have trouble sleeping? That's not normal for me. And then further on, in the last month, I lost about 20 pounds, which was
20 pounds in a month.
I was at 143, which I don't even remember the last time I was this low in weight.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't do anything about it.
Wow.
So I realized that it came to the last days of making Telos. And at that time, I hadn't decided on a meaning yet, or a name. And Telos, one of the meanings of Telos is the end.
Yes.
And while I wasn't exactly sure if this is the right title, I really heavily resonated with the meaning that this is the end. And for a little bit of time, I thought this is the last thing I will ever do. I thought that I just poured everything into making this album and I have no more energy left.
And if you can answer this as honestly as possible, how did you feel when you came to that realization that was possible for you to walk away?
Well, I really didn't want it to be the case.
But how did you feel knowing that it quite possibly could
be the end? I don't even know. It's such a good question that nobody's ever asked me. But I think for a minute I felt like that's the only outcome possible because I have nothing left. And the way I felt like I could never make a better album than my last 2, which is why I haven't in a decade attempted to make an album, I felt like, well, this is definitely it. I will never be able to beat that. Plus the weight loss, plus the stress and sleepless nights, I was like, this might just be the end. And this might be my great last thing that I will ever put out into
And
this universe.
you know what the crazy thing is, and this might really piss some fans off, but as I've moved forward in my life, I've come to the realization that's okay.
Mm-hmm. That's
That's totally okay.
difficult emotion to feel in that moment.
It's totally okay to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
People do it all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they're so good at it, we even forget that they aren't making records anymore and we're waiting for the next one. You know, and they ain't making one. So it's totally fine, I think, to come to that conclusion.
And I wasn't even sure after that thought whether I will make more music, because part of me really was this exhausted mentally, and physically.
How do you feel now?
I feel better now.
You're going to make another record now?
I'm going to make another record now.
Fuck
I gotta.
You do it. But it's good. It's good to acknowledge that you can. I think you've got to be able to let go in moments when you're holding on real tight, or try to realize that at the end of the day, man, it's all just time and space, and
It's all we got.
it's all we got, man. The people on this album, it reads beautiful. The collaborators read beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the connection is. You said there is one. I just think that it's a really lovely looking selection of people, one of which I wish was still here. So
Same.
how did you go about choosing people? And if this is a concept record, who qualifies?
I think people qualify if I genuinely love them. If they give me some sort of inspiration, if they do something that really does something meaningful to me. And each of the artists have a different influence. For example, Muse, my very first concert with my band was a Muse cover, Plug-in Baby. First concert, 12 years old.
You did it? They can't even play that perfectly half the time. Have you ever heard Matt fuck that up? So good. If you ever see him play live and they fuck it up, man, you will never see anyone laugh harder than Matt Bellamy.
I've never seen them fuck it up. But for an example, Matt, one of the most influential people to my life.
You remind me of him, by the way, but that's a whole other story.
No, that's a compliment.
No, it is.
I would definitely take. I made that song and I said, this is going to be the instrumental song or with Muse, but nobody else.
Yeah.
There was no other option that I would have considered, because Muse is very deep in classical music. They oftentimes rework classical pieces. And this is what the last song is. I reworked my favorite, most influential classical piece to my life. And it was either going to be Muse or nobody else.
So what's the outreach for that like?
Well, I've met Matt before, and we've always wanted to make music together, and we actually have tried a couple times, but I think neither him or I are just going to make a song so that we can put our names next to each other. If it's not meaningful and right, it's not it. And we've tried, and it didn't work.
He doesn't do that either. He doesn't just show up on people's albums.
Right. Which is another amazing thing, that we actually got to this point where I have a song with Muse that is the most unbelievable collaboration I could have ever dreamed of. And then Matt Bellamy has a deep connection to Jeff Buckley.
He does. He owns the guitar.
He owns the guitar and is deeply inspired by Jeff Buckley. And I feel like a lot of the collaborations on my album ended up happening because people heard the album. I genuinely just invited people. I played them the album and they didn't want to be on it. And then they were like, I'll do whatever song, as many as possible, multiple of the collaborators, which is amazing. And Bellamy played guitar on another song on the album.
Which one?
The Census.
Yeah, amazing.
Some of the solos and a tailed bit of John Mayer's at the end of it too.
Yeah.
And John recorded guitars for another song. Essentially, it became like this super group where everybody kind of wanted to contribute to little bits of the album. And I feel like I formed my perfect band to make this album with, where everybody just wanted to be a part of this larger project. And that was really important for me, for everybody to know the context of this whole album. It's not just, you're not part of a song, you're part of a project. And I want you to know what you're part of.
You obviously did an incredible job of explaining your intention.
Thank you.
Because, everyone showed up. And,
everyone showed up.
It's like anything, if you put it meaningfully, people understand what it means to you, they'll at least consider it with meaning.
Yeah.
Matt Bellamy on a song like this isn't your only first. So when Jeff Buckley died, I was in New York and I actually saw the news report on MTV when he went missing in the days before they ended up finding his body in the river. And I didn't have Grace on me at the time I was traveling. I hadn't settled. I went straight down to, I think it was like Tower was still open, and I bought Grace and I came back, I listened to it, and I had a pretty emotional day. And I think deep down knew that, if he's missing and he's in the river, it's not going to end well. I was hoping, and what has come to pass is how beautifully the estate has been managed by his mother Mary and by the people I'm sure, who assist and help, and how thoughtful Jeff Buckley's music has been carefully curated even after his passing. I feel as a fan.
Yep.
Like everything has been done thoughtfully
Mhm.
and with purpose. So it's not lost on me that Jeff Buckley's name appears on your album and one of his most impactful pieces of music. I'm sure if he was alive today, he would still say Dream Brother because it's really about his father. And the lyrics, which, and I'm taking my time here for a reason, have been poured over because of the imagery
Mhm.
that he just describes, which ultimately many people feel is very closely connected to his own ending. I don't go there. I think it was a tragic accident.
Mhm.
But people get very intense about Dream Brother and about Jeff. And so I know, because we spoke about it when it was in the works, how important this was to you. I'm sorry I took my time, but Jeff means a lot to me too. So let's turn this now over to you and about the journey of working with Dream Brother. It deserves some time.
So Dream Brother has always been one of the songs that was the most inspirational to me. And that's a hard statement to make because everything that Jeff Buckley has ever touched is absolutely incredible in its own way. And as being in the dance music world, I've actually always thought that there's a side of Dream Brother that could live in a different context. That composition to me has always screamed it could live in another way. And I was on tour at the point and just thought I could probably make this into an incredible, respectful, dance-ish song. And I never thought it would ever happen, but I had my management reach out.
So you never did an edit of it to try it first?
No.
You just, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reach out.
Yeah, it was just an idea at this point.
Because, by the way, I want that to be really clear, because most people, maybe even including myself, would have sat in a laptop in the back of a fucking van on the way to Roskilde and whipped it up. Taking that riff, and it just, I would have been like, let me see. Let me just see. And the fact that you didn't.
I didn't need to see it because I could feel it. I could hear it in my head.
Okay.
And I knew it was going to be amazing, but I also didn't
That's why
think
you're you.
it would it would ever happen. Because there are no Jeff Buckley remixes, collaborations. So
You'd barely even hear it. Name the syncs. Can you? Can you
Right.
name the times you've even really seen or heard a song in a movie, or certainly not a fucking ad? It just doesn't happen.
Right. So the chances weren't great. At least that's what I thought. We reached out, and I think they were really relieved that I've asked for this song specifically, because apparently a lot of the people all wanted to do Hallelujah, and they just categorically said, no.
Sorry, my shoulders drooped, and I really should be more respectful. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal song, no question.
And his version is phenomenal. It's not as good as Leonard Cohen's version, because the original, in my mind, should always remain as the blueprint of any song that's ultimately embraced like that. But it is fucking phenomenal. He made it his own, like he always did.
Yep.
Like anything he did. Like he did on Kangaroo. He made that his own as well. However he did it, right? The Smiths. But really? That's what you're going to go for? I'm sorry. Like, hey, we're trying to sell a fucking SUV. Can we get Hallelujah?
Yeah.
Fucking
I
hell.
understand where the requests are coming
Sorry,
from.
I tried to pull back. I'm going further. Please save me from myself.
So we've asked the question, and they were really happy to hear that, and they were very open to it, and they essentially agreed to it without there ever having been even a demo of it. I've never even mocked
And
it
this
up.
is his mum?
This is his mom and his estate, and they happened to like what I do, which is really a blessing for me. And this was in 2015, 16, 17. So 2017, so 7 years ago. But I didn't have the song. I just had the idea, and they didn't have the files because they're somewhere on some tapes.
Really? Of Dream Brother?
They were on
Wow.
tapes, so they went back to the studio. They recorded
Because
Dream
Andy
Brother, and
Andy Wallace mixed it, right? So
I believe it was him who reprinted all the tapes, right?
they only had the half-inch tape. They only had they had the one shot. You got it. Wow. I mean, this really gives you an insight to how Jeff was moving. He was just moving, right? He was moving. He was like, where next?
Yeah. And some of the files that I've received with a photograph of the handwriting, what things were meant to be, like vibes, for example, I don't know what actually really made the record. Because there's tons of takes that I know didn't make the record.
He was just getting it out of his system. He wasn't making it and cataloging it like it's a piece of music. He was fucking working it out. Wow.
I think we've talked about this.
Oh, that's deep. That's deep.
2020. You mentioned that you interviewed Jeff Buckley and how big of a fan you were, and then I let you in on the secret 4 years ago that I was working on Dream Brother.
I nearly threw up in my mouth with excitement.
But I thought, this is a really, really difficult balance, and we spoke about this. It's the song that means so much to me, and this vision that I had to take the song to a different place, but you don't have the genius to give you a yes or a no, or maybe do this, maybe do that.
Impossible. Absolutely impossible.
How do you
impossible to make the
approach
right
that?
decision.
Right.
You can only trust your gut at that point.
Right.
You can only trust your gut.
And I tried to find this, and I think I successfully did, find this balance between keeping every bit of the DNA that makes Dream Brother so special and uneasy in the best way possible alive. It's got this like tension throughout the whole record that I wanted to keep alive, but let it live in a different universe while respecting every bit, adding every bit of open hi-hat from the original drummer and every bit that I could somehow repurpose. I could have used any sample, but I really wanted as much of the original stems that I could make sense of to live in this.
Well, as much as we all wanted to make Jeff some kind of like timeless Renaissance human being who seemed to exist in all the decades, he was a futurist too. You can tell. I've read so many things about him. He was looking for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Even his decision to work with Tom Verlaine, which people thought he was trying to go back to get a sound. He was trying to fucking make something fucking edgy and fucking put me in the room and get it out of me, right? Get it out of me. And I always felt like his music was just dying to get out of him.
Yeah.
Like he was just like, fuck, just get it out. And I think you've put it into an architecture with so much thought and care, because that's what I love about Jeff is there was never any architecture. Even the drum tracks didn't feel remotely stuck,
Yeah.
And I feel like you just did it in a way, in your way, where you bended technology to his will. Is that the best way I can put it?
Thank you very much for saying that. That means a lot to me. And when I mentioned this to you, I was really nervous to send you this 4 years ago whenever I sent you the first demo of it, because I knew that you know him so well and you know everything about his music, that if you had told me, I don't know if this is the right
do this,
then I don't know how I would have reacted, because that was sort of the pillar of Telos. Everything was built around Dream Brother. That's from when I started making songs for an album without really having a goal. That's the only song that remained. Every other song is gone. I started over completely, besides Dream Brother. That's the one song that, to me, was kind of giving me that emotion that I wanted and remained. So if you had told me that you think this isn't what the song deserves, the whole thing would have crumbled.
I don't remember what I said. I'm sure I would have taken my time to say it. I remember being moved by it, but I would have told you to. You should know that.
I appreciate it.
If I thought you'd taken it into the wrong room to try to appeal to the people who wouldn't get it, I think I would have tried to find a way. I wouldn't have done it in text,
right?
But I would have tried to find a way to say, hey, you sure you got the feeling right?
I still feel the same emotion listening to both songs, and after having worked on my version for so long, I forgot how slow and different the original feels.
Yeah. It's almost I don't even want to say it, because it buys into the whole chatter around it. But it's like a funeral march, Dream Brother, almost. You know what I mean? It's got a real sense of sort of like it's definitely the end. And it's so crazy that it's the end. I mean, it was the end of Grace. It's the end of the only album he ever really was able to see through to its completion. It's fucking nuts. Man, life is crazy, right?
Life is crazy.
I totally give in to the things I don't see or understand, but man, sometimes they are not fun.
Yeah, that's part of the emotion that we need to feel to let all of that out. It's not always fun.
You must have had some emotional moments listening back to this.
Oh, still do.
Yeah, real moments, real outpourings. Yeah, because it's so you.
It's a very special song, and like I mentioned, it's the only song that stayed from just aimlessly making music and years before. This was 2017. I had the vision for the song.
Yeah.
And by the way, a lot of the music on this album, it's not just I didn't sit down and made an album. I wrote Out of Time in 2015, right after I delivered True Colors, my album. And I bought my first place in LA. And that was the very first chord progression I wrote in 2015.
Was that the joint with the M&M's machine?
That was a different one. That was before that.
Right.
So this was a long time ago, and I wrote this chord progression. I always thought, well, this is amazing, but what am I going to do with it now? This is like not where I musically am, yet it's completely timeless.
Well, it's also such a jump forward. I mean, you've just finished this album, and then you go and you make something that I feel is like fucking a gigantic leap. I mean, in some respects, you must have just been like, I love this album, but holy shit, how did that just happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some things take time, and I think if you make music from the heart, it's timeless because it's you.
So what is life like when you take 9 years to make an album? You know, when you get off the treadmill, what does life become?
Well, I think when you take that much time, you can remind yourself how excited you felt when you made your first album. Because when you make your first album, that feeling is incredible. Everything you make is exciting. Every transition you make, you've never made before. Every drop you made is the first drop you've ever made. And then you make another album, and then you have to follow up. Now expectations were set in this world. Now it's more of like, okay, well, what have I not explored yet? Because I've done this.
And also, I know what moves the crowd. Let's just be really clear.
It's impossible not to think
I know
about
what's going to move the crowd. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I'm addicted to that feeling, and I'm going to smash the fuck out of that festival.
Once you have this drug of like crowd reaction and love, I try to remind myself to forget it. But you can't. It's in you forever. It will never leave. But, you know, time heals. And when you take a decade to forget about all of these things, you can start feeling those emotions again. You can start getting excited about the transitions that you make. And it's like, wow, it feels like the first time again.
But what is life like when you take 9 years to make an album? You know, so many of your peers have still not stopped. I still see mutual friends and people we played shows with. I stopped when I joined Apple. It was conscious for me. I was like, my ears are getting burnt. I've had a great time. I may come back to it, I may not, but I'm going to do this now because my kids are going to grow up and I'm not going to miss that by being over there till 2 a.m. So I made a conscious decision, thankfully, because this came along. A lot of people don't. You made a conscious decision. What has life been like?
I did and I didn't because I never stopped. I just restructured my life. I still kept touring and never took a year off. I mean, the most I took off was before Stay. My friends from Germany came over for like 4 weeks and I didn't have shows and I had probably a 6-week stretch of actual downtime. And then I came back with Stay and I felt refreshed and it felt like a new version of me. But I've just decided I'm going to try the single route. I'm not going to put the pressure on me to create an album because it really kills me. It's so much pressure. And part of me never wanted to make another album again because it's just so much work and so much thinking. It's not just the songs, it's how they live with one another. And it's not like back in the day where you would hire a guy to tell you, well, this should be song number 7. This should be song number 2. The way I made this album is there was only one way this album would have worked the way it is. And the keys were set in stone and they had to transition the way they do. And I didn't want to put that stress on me. So after True Colors, I made singles. And luckily for me, they were successful. And there was a middle and there was a Stay. And what else I released in between, it kind of gave me a little bit more flight time to get inspired and get back to the feeling that I needed to feel to sit down and create an album that I find meaningful to me.
That's a totally fair answer. I mean, you know, and please forgive me for not, realizing that you have been touring as much as you have because I stepped out. So I don't know who's kind of on the road and who's not anymore.
I have stopped doing these like brutal tours where you're on a bus for 3 months. For the most part in 2017, 18 was probably the last one I've done. And I've decided to sort of try this model of where I do a lot of Vegas. That's a part of my career. I do a lot of festivals, and I do these one-off markets. I do a thing called Zedd in the Park in LA that I do once a year. I play my bigger markets, and I don't go on a bus and sleep crawled up for 6 days.
I mean, there's a convenience to Vegas, and that's why a lot of people do it. It opened up its doors to the clubbing community, and it was very successful, and it's been lucrative for all. You know, I've spent enough time in Vegas to know that when I'm there working, I was there for the Super Bowl, when I'm there working, I'm on the outside of why 99% of the people are in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to and fro with purpose. I might have a nice dinner, I might have a glass of wine, but man, it's fucking go time. Now, I feel like you're in that 1% as well. You are not doing the 99%. You're going in, you're doing your thing, you're getting the fuck out. How have you, as someone who really has a lot of Vegas experience now, if you can put it into context, how have you been able to manage that? Because you're there to ensure that 99% go back home wherever they flew from or they trained from, or they drove from, and they're like, Zedd was off the fucking hook, and now I'm back at work.
Yep.
Does it ever get a bit much? Because it's like it's a dystopian disconnection in some respects. You have to provide them with that, but you aren't living it.
It is sort of a disconnection. It is almost my only connection to the world as well, because I have to say that I stopped listening to the radio. The radio was my imagination of what this country likes.
Yeah.
That used to be what I would drive and listen to the radio, and I'm like, okay, I think I understand what people like, and I would use that information kind of to bring that to Vegas and make my sets. I kind of stopped listening to music a lot. I listen to all the stuff that still inspires me from back in the day, but I don't go and explore new artists unless it naturally happens. For me, Vegas, like you mentioned, it is work. I'm not going there to gamble. I'm not going there to party. I show up, we program a lot, we improve the show, and I've been at the Club Omnia that I'm at right now. This is probably my 5th year. We still improve the show every week between the shows. It always has to improve. It always has to get better. I'm there to ensure that the 99% that go to Vegas to have an amazing time go back and think this was the best night of their lives.
Perfect.
It's not for me.
Yeah, but I mean, if you approach it with the same level of intention you do in your music, then why wouldn't you get the same joy out of it?
Right. I mean, this is another crazy thing that I discovered, and we've talked about alcohol a little bit earlier. I used to drink before nearly every show. My rule of thumb was I don't drink until the sun goes down. That was kind of like what keeps me in check. Day shows, let's play those sober. And it became this normal habit of I go to a place, somebody gives me a Jack and Coke, and like I have one before the show, I have one on stage, maybe two, maybe one after. It became so normal that at some point, you get older and all of a sudden the hangovers last more than the next show. And then when you start like measuring your calorie intake, there was this moment where I had to make a decision.
Sugar off the chart. Sugar off the chart.
It's pretty bad. I don't know if people actually realize how bad it is. It's pretty bad.
I think we do, and we choose to ignore it.
I know you do.
I do now, but I think I did for a long time, and I think shit, man. There comes a time where you've got to ask yourself some tough questions, about how you're living your life on a health level. And
but I was scared of that conversation with myself.
So was I.
I was scared that I wouldn't be able to be on stage if I couldn't drink.
Yeah.
Because it's been a decade of me drinking on stage, and it became so normal that I remember the Vegas show that I played sober, the first one. I was really scared of it because at some point I started writing down my calories, and I had my dinner, and it's like, well, either I'm going to have food or I'm going to drink. That's my choice because I only have this many calories left, and every shot is 100 calories.
Yeah.
So I don't have that much room. So I remember this feeling of like, today I'm going to play Vegas sober. And Vegas isn't the easiest room to play. It's not 3,000 fans that flew across the world to see you. It's people who are in Vegas who are like, I know Zedd. I'm going to see Zedd.
Yeah.
I know this guy.
And most of the time they're looking for each other.
Fair enough.
They're looking for people to meet, hang out with,
fair.
whatever. Of course, it's a social experience. Totally.
I'll play Careless Whisper when they kiss.
100%. It's more like a festival than it is a dedicated Zedd show.
Yeah, it's not a headline, hard-ticketed thing where people go to see me. So my role is a little different, and I was scared of that show. I was scared how I was going to feel.
Can I assume that you were scared that you weren't going to enjoy it, not everybody else?
Yeah, of course. I wasn't scared that I wasn't going to be able to be professional. I was scared that I'm going to be on stage and like not feel it and not want to do it.
Yeah.
And it was probably like 30 minutes into the show that I realized, wait, I didn't drink. I had the same feeling, I had the same emotions, and the same joy, if not more, when I was sober. And that was the realization that I really had to make, and I possibly wish I had made sooner, that the alcohol isn't the thing that gives me the joy. It's really the adrenaline and the happiness to do what I can do. I mean, also, at a certain age, you can afford to do certain things.
Sure, fuck it, have a good time.
You know?
Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. And yeah, I mean, you say you wish you did it earlier. You're right on time. I mean, I'm just discovering this at this point in my life, and I'm happy I'm discovering it now.
I'm scared to discover the salt one.
You're fine.
How much time do you have till I have to cut out salt?
A lot.
Okay.
A lot.
I'll take it.
A lot. By the way, when I told my guy that I'd spent a week with no salt, he looked at me like, "How?
That's hard.
What is food? Like, what have you eaten? You know?" But I did it. I did it for
I'm
a
proud
week.
of you,
I
man.
did it for a
That's
week, and
impressive.
I actually learned more in that week about what flavor is.
You forget, huh? You forget how
how
things
good natural flavor is, and then
Right.
now I'm kind of in a low sodium experience, and I'm dabbling with it and putting it in.
Mhm.
It's so amazing how little I need
Wow.
than what I had
need a
before.
lot.
Yeah, but you don't.
That's how I feel, right? I
Right.
need to do what you do.
Well, come to me in like 15 years' time, and I'll talk you through it. But because any time before that, I'm just going to be your bummer friend, and I'm not going to be your bummer friend who's going to bum you out on salt. Salt the fuck it up, Buttercup. Salt it up. Well, a couple of things. First of all, a sincere and heartfelt congratulations on completing this body of work.
Thank you very much.
I know what it means to you. I knew by listening to it, and our conversation for the last hour and change, which went like that,
Yeah, holy.
has only just qualified what I already knew. So congrats.
Thank you very much. It means a lot.
I don't know how you're going to bring this to life. I know you're not going to probably reserve this only for Vegas.
Definitely not.
I'd imagine that you have ideas on doing something with this album that in a live setting that works for you.
Yep.
And not just for all of us. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you.
And I'm also looking forward to the next body of work, whenever it may come, because thank goodness you came to that conclusion.
Yep. It will happen.